playing for the American League Championship. I don't believe it. It just continues.
High fly ball into right field. She is gone.
Oh, drives one. Right field. Did he do it? He did. Are you kidding me? Let's go.
All right, we're back. It's the FSS Plus podcast, Future Star Series, FutureStarSeries.com. Hey, the Padres are wheeling and dealing. Pitchers are dropping like flies, but I don't hit the IL until next week, so I'm here for work. Jason Churchill, Joe Doyle, we're 2 weeks from opening day. Less than a week if you're a Dodger or a Padre or a Dodgers fan or a Padres fan who opened their season at, Gocheok Skydome in Seoul, South Korea on March 20.
Better job than I could have done.
I think I nailed that. I think it's Gocheok. I think that's how you pronounce that. And Joe, I hope you're ready to talk a little NL West in addition to our American League West preview today, because there was news Wednesday about the NL West with Dylan Cease headed to San Diego. But we're going to preview the American League West on the show today. We'll get to our 3 matchups to watch in college baseball from a draft point of view for the most part. But there are some big time, like highly ranked. I think there's 2 different matchups of top 15 teams, and one of them's I think both teams are top 10. So there's a lot of fun stuff to talk about there as well. Joe, let's talk about the Dylan Cease deal right at the top here really quick. Cease goes to San Diego. San Diego sends Drew Thorpe. Is it Jairo? Is that how you pronounce it?
I think it's Jairo. Yeah.
It's Jairo. Sometimes there's a soft J, so I always have to check with somebody else. Jairo Iriarte, Samuel Zavala, plus reliever Steven Wilson to the White Sox. So it's Thorpe, who came over from the Yankees in the Soto deal, plus 2 other prospects and a big league reliever for 2 years of Dylan Cease. What's your take on that deal right now, Joe?
Yeah, I think from a White Sox perspective, it's probably not the flashy deal that you were expecting. I think if you were a White Sox fan, you were probably looking at this as, oh, we're going to be getting a headline name. We're going to be getting someone that, everybody knows about. He's all over the top prospect list. But I think when you boil it down and you look at what Dylan Cease was last year, which is what you're paying for, you're not paying for what he was in 2022. At least that's not the way that the market works. It's a 4.58 ERA on 33 starts, 177 innings, and again, 79 walks. Now, he led the league in walks in 2022. He led the league in walks in 2020. And this is by no means me diminishing what Dylan Cease is, but in 2023, he was squarely a league average pitcher. So I think moving 2 years of Dylan Cease for what could amount to 2 future pieces of your rotation in Thorpe and Iriarte, I think is a good move. I actually think this is enough value for it to make sense for the White Sox. And even though they might not have, received a superstar in this deal, they're not going to be a competitive team in 2024 and probably not 2025. So it made sense to offload him while you can.
Yeah, the thing with Thorpe too, I think there's this assumption in reading your rankings and things that you said about Thorpe, watching Thorpe, kind of reading the profile, seeing what he is like. There's some velocity to the fastball, but that seems to be the biggest concern. Like, he's got a pretty good changeup. He's got a pretty good curveball. The changeup might be ahead of the curveball at this point. It seems most reports are suggesting that. But the concern is, fastball value at this point. You can throw 92 to 95, but what does that look like? What kind of movement is there? What kind of shape is there? Is there legit fastball value? And the consensus seems like maybe not so much. He might be a secondary heavy kind of a number 4 starter with a chance to be more than that if he can do more with the fastball. Is that pretty much how you're seeing it with Drew Thorpe? Because he's probably the headliner in this deal from a known name standpoint, probably mostly because of the Juan Soto trade.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. I do think Drew Thorpe profiles as a number 4. I think he's changeup primary as things currently stand. And it's not even that he's not even getting a ton of value out of the fastball. The command of the fastball is also fringy to just average. And so when you've got that, you've got a pitch that doesn't particularly perform well, and you don't have great feel for throwing it into the quadrant that you're looking to throw it, I think it obviously can get hit a little bit, of course.
Mhm.
But yeah, the changeup is really good. I mean, it's a plus changeup. It's a really good curveball that I think is going to end up being at least above average at the next level. So maybe he ends up being a guy that pitches backwards. But I would expect now the White Sox have plenty of options that they've added in by way of trades this winter. But I would expect we see Drew Thorpe in the White Sox rotation by at the latest June 1st. I mean, he's going to be a big piece of that organization moving forward.
Interesting. Iriarte, a little bit more upside, but a little bit more reliever risk, as I understand it. But tell me a little bit about Samuel Zavala. He's one that I don't know a ton about. I saw where you had him ranked in the Padres system. Pretty good player, top 10-ish kind of prospect, depending on who you ask. But we're asking you, what's Zavala at the end of the day, and what's his timeline to get to the majors and help the White Sox?
Yeah, Zavala is a ways away. He struggled a little bit, at least on the slash side of things in Double A. He is still very, very young, but he's tooled up. I mean, it's speed, it's power, it's throwing arm. It's kind of unrefined at this point. I do want to take a second to talk about Iriarte because for me, like if there's going to be a guy that's going to reach the highest ceiling in this trade, it's probably Jairo Iriarte. The stuff is big. It is. There's a reliever risk for sure, but he's a very, very good athlete. He moves well. He's athletic. He has kind of the starter clay, if you will. And I think he's going to end up like, here's my issue with it. I'm not sure whether or not the White Sox are in a position to fully optimize a starting pitching prospect at this point. But the stuff is, for me, higher upside than Drew Thorpe. And I think he could end up being a better player than Drew Thorpe if they're patient with him. For me, and I'll just jump into this really quick while I've got it pulled up. So I did re-rack these guys, and Thorpe will end up the number 3 prospect in the White Sox organization for me. Iriarte will rank number 6 in the White Sox organization for me, right above Edgar Quero. And then Zavala will rank number 11, just behind Dom Fletcher.
So 3 top 11 prospects into your system that did a pretty decent job over the winter of staying patient, I would say. Chris Getz stayed patient. This didn't seem like a deal that was on the table anywhere over the winter, and they finally waited. They got the deal they wanted, and they made it. It's 2 years of Dylan Cease for 3 prospects and a guy in Wilson that, I don't know, maybe gets hot the first half and they're able to flip him for an A-ball kid in July, or maybe hangs around. I don't know. What's he, 29 years old? Not really a prospect, not really a long-term thing. I don't know that really changes a whole lot in the NL West from a who's going to win the division standpoint, Joe, but the Padres on paper now look a lot more like a playoff team than they did before, or even if you thought they were a playoff team before, that's a little more firm in your pocket at this point, isn't it?
Yeah, we talked about this a couple of weeks ago. Like, it's clearly the Dodgers. I think the Dodgers could win 106 games this year, and that's without Shohei Ohtani on the mound. They look like a complete team, assuming Mookie Betts can play shortstop, which is, I think, a pretty big question mark right now.
It's crazy.
But you look at that division after that, you have the Diamondbacks, who I think you and I both agree are probably somewhere in that 86 to 90 range. And then for me, I had the Padres taking second in this division as an 88, 89 win team. I think this might turn them into a 90 win team, a 91 win team. I don't think it puts them over the scales by any means. I mean, like I said, Dylan Cease was squarely a league average arm last year. This is not. I think if you're assuming that the Padres are trading for Cy Young candidate Dylan Cease, you are glass half full to the extreme. But it does make the team a couple of wins better, and it does round out that rotation a bit more than it was. And if you're buying the upside, it's essentially Dylan Cease replacing Blake Snell, and that's a good. That's a pretty good team. So we'll see whether or not Bob Melvin and that front office can get the team chemistry and culture moving in a direction that lends well to success and winning.
He was nearly a 4-win pitcher, despite the fact that the pure ERA hated him. Like, that didn't work out, but he was pretty much league average. His xERA of just a little over 4, his FIP in the high 3s, his xFIP in the low 4s. I mean, that's pretty much league average, right on the dot, what you were saying. But he was still almost a 4-win guy because he went 177 innings. That can help your ball club as well. That's something not even Blake Snell did a whole lot in his Cy Young season. 33 starts a year ago, 32 in 2021 and 2022 each. That's what they're getting. That's what they're getting. If they get more out of them, then great. Padres are going to be really interesting now. Really, really interesting to see how that impacts their bullpen. But from the standpoint of, as we wrap this up here, from the standpoint of, hey, why spend 6+ years of Thorpe, 6+ years of Iriarte and the upside that might be there, and 6+ years of Zavala to take on 2 years of Dylan Cease? And I mentioned this on Twitter on Wednesday a little bit too. I saw a lot of mostly fan opinions that they gave up too much for 2 years of Dylan Cease. The thing is, we don't know what Drew Thorpe what that's going to look like. We don't know how long it's going to take him to make any sort of an impact, if he does ever. We don't know those things. We don't know Iriarte is a starter. We don't know what that impact looks like once he gets it. We don't know how long it's going to take for Zavala to do anything if he ever reaches the big leagues. You're trading for, at this point, you're trading away some risk and some upside to get more probability, to remove some of that risk. I think you have a pretty decent idea what Dylan Cease can do for you, even on the downside. And you get it right now, where when you have Machado still kind of sort of in his prime, when you have Tatis Jr., basically in his prime, when we have some of these other guys on our team, Cronenworth, still able to produce some for you. That's the whole point, right? Like, is that how you see this, or do you kind of not really love it from the Padres standpoint, considering they gave up 3 of their top 10-ish prospects to get 2 years of a league average starter?
I genuinely think it was a good match. I don't think the White Sox gave up too much. I don't think the Padres gave up too much. I think it was a pretty fair deal, assuming that you get something in between the 2022 and 2023 version of Dylan Cease in San Diego. But what we do know, Jason, is AJ Preller has been the general manager of the San Diego Padres for a decade, and he's spent literally billions of dollars, and they don't have anything really to show for it. And I think, with Peter Seidler now, unfortunately, out of the picture, I think AJ maybe sees a new leadership structure. I'm just forecasting here. I'm just making wild assumptions that are probably incorrect. But he may see a different ownership structure in San Diego that isn't as patient and isn't as hunky dory as Peter Seidler was, and
or aggressive with money, Joe.
Or, well, at the same time, it's like it might be now or never, because I think AJ has to recognize that if San Diego goes out and goes 77 and 80. 77 and 89. I'm not going to do the math right here. 77 and 85. If they go 77 and 85, I don't know if he keeps his job.
Yeah.
And so you got to make a move like this. And, I'll also give credit to AJ. We thought that farm system was dead and buried 2 years ago. And, they've now got Leotis DeVries and Ethan Salas and Dylan Lesko, and they've got some Robbie Snelling coming. So maybe they thought that they could move from some of the breadth of that farm. So it was a good move by San Diego. It was a win now move.
Yeah, despite the 2020 season where they were 37 and 23, they have one season of more than 83 wins under AJ Preller. You're right. Like, we talked about him being the hot seat guy. Like, I'm convinced AJ Preller's not good at his job. I'm not saying he's the worst GM in baseball. I'm convinced he's not good at his job, but I also think people can learn. I always use Bob Melvin as a manager as the best example of that. He was not good in Seattle. He got better in Arizona. He got better in Oakland, right? Like, we saw the best of Bob Melvin his Arizona and his Oakland years, but he had no idea what he was doing really in Seattle. And not that they had a bunch of talent, but that's kind of how this works. It can work while you're with the same organization too. So maybe Preller will just go in different directions and learn from it and have a different supporting staff, and we'll see what happens. It's a veteran team, and their winning window is a couple of years, right? I mean, Darvish is 115 years old.
Yeah, I can't imagine. Darvish is getting older. Machado is getting older. I mean, he's still a very good player, but he's getting older. Juan Soto.
We're all getting older, Joe. We're all getting older.
I feel like, man, I'm not in my prime anymore.
We all have a birthday coming up. Even me, just had one. There's still one coming up around the corner. All right. That was a fun trade. That kind of came a little bit out of, I don't want to say out of nowhere, because we were talking about Dylan Cease pretty much all winter. But it was kind of cool, kind of fun to get some news like that in the middle of in the middle of March when everybody's thinking about spring training and prospects and things like that. And we'll be able to talk about the prospect games that are coming up this weekend as well. We'll be able to do that next week. But
You excited for that, man? I'm stoked for that.
I don't really care from
Okay.
a viewing standpoint, because I said this last week. I don't really care from a viewing standpoint. I think it's great for the game to start getting this stuff out there, because making these young kids accessible, all it does is breed fandom, right? It's a great idea. We've been pounding the table for minor league games to be on TV more, right? And then we start to get it a little bit, and then I just think this is another step in the right direction. I think ultimately every team should play one or two of these games every single spring. And I was talking to Future Star Series reporter Mike Ashmore about this the other day. He wanted more out of this. And I'm like, here's the thing. He wanted them all to be on national TV. And I get it. But the Futures game that MLB puts on gets terrible ratings.
I think that's a terrible product. It's just varied.
But the thing is, like Reds fans do not give a rat's you know what about Rays prospects. They're not going to watch a Rays Marlins or a Rays Red Sox prospect game. They're going to watch the Reds game. Right. That's the only one they're going to care about. So the fact that for the most part, I think there's 6 national games, but for the most part, these prospect games are on locally. They're on the RSNs. That makes a ton of sense. I think it's a big step in the right direction. So I'm excited for it from that.
You know what I'd like to see? You know what I'd like to see, Jason? I'd like to see them turn this into a rivalry series every
series.
Spring.
Thank you. A series.
Yeah.
Padres and Mariners should play a 3-game prospect series every single year.
Yeah, it'd be cool.
Royals and the Rangers, right? Every single year. Yeah.
I think that would be epic. And, there are some natural rivalries that could facilitate. Like the Friars and the Mariners are technically supposed to be a rivals. They share a complex. It'd be cool to see them play 3 games in 4 days and get an expanded look at some of these top prospects.
And you could do a whole the Diamondbacks come over. Like, that's the great thing about Arizona in particular with spring training is they're all close enough together to make some sense to get the 2 together and play 3 games.
It'd be easy.
And maybe you alternate sites. Maybe it's at the Royals home site one year and it's at the Diamondbacks home site the next year. You wouldn't necessarily want to go back and forth and make that drive or anything, even though it's pretty short. But yeah, that's what I think we could be headed to. But I think this was a good way to push it out. Make sure it gets out the regional series. So that's something I'll watch, but I'm not like giddy for it. Like I think some folks are. We're going to get like 2 or 3 plate appearances at most of the guys we really want to see. I'm going to see hundreds of those on MILB TV all season long. So why am I jumping for joy and, making nachos for this one? You know what I mean?
Because this one is shot on a Sony camera and those are shot on iPhone 3s.
No, I'm not convinced this.
MILB cameras do not provide a good product.
I'm not.
Come on.
In some cases,
it looks like they're all 5. It looks like they're all shot on
not
battlefield.
All. No, not all.
All of them.
Most of the AA and
Shout out
AAA
to
ones are pretty good. But if you go down further than AA, you do have a little bit of a problem. And to be honest with you, this is kind of funny to bring it up because I was complaining about this over the weekend when I was talking to some folks about MILB TV and how far it's come, even though it's taken 20 years to get there. Some of the angles are useless to me. I will not watch a game that's televised from Funko Field in Everett, the high A affiliate of the Seattle. I won't watch a game. I'll just go to the game because it's from the press box, which is 120 feet behind home plate. I can't see anything. I can't tell what the pitch was. I can't see the pitch location. I can't see if the hitter chased or the break on the pitch. It's useless to me. So I wish we could get center field camera angles, but other than that, I'm fine with the quality. Totally fine with the quality other than the angles. All right, let's talk about some real stuff. The National League West was fun. The Padres, the Dodgers, the Giants, the Diamondbacks, and the Rockies. And it was like, and we went into the NL Central preview, Joe, and I was like, this is the most boring division in baseball, even more so than the American League Central. And at the end of that conversation, I was like, this division is actually very, very interesting. And I think the American League West might be one of the more interesting and tightly run race in baseball because of the 3 teams at the top. But the American League West won last year by the Astros. The Texas Rangers won the World Series. The top 3 teams in the division, Houston, Texas, Seattle, have all been to the postseason at least once the last 2 years. Obviously, Houston has won a couple of titles. And then there's the Angels and the A's. I kind of feel like that's the conversation with the American League West there at the top.
Yeah.
But the way we kind of do this is, which team improved the most, which team improved the least, who's the hot seat GM, pick a winner, and then is there a pivotal player? So we'll start right there at the top. Which team in this division, this was not easy as I'm thinking about this. Which team, Joe, in this division improved the most for you over the offseason? Not just did the most, but improved the most.
You and I both sit in Seattle. It's not easy. I think it's got to be Seattle. I think in terms of improving, it's got to be Seattle. I know that's going to come from, people are going to say, oh, Jason and Joe both sit in Seattle. Like, how can you say that? I mean, you look at what that team did. Now, they didn't spend any more money, but, Mitch Garver is Seattle hasn't had a designated hitter since Nelson Cruz. The Jorge Polanco, Seattle hasn't had a second baseman since Robinson Cano.
Really? Yeah.
Yeah. So you package those two together. You look at some of the trades that they moved. They moved Suarez. They moved Teoscar. They went out and got pieces that in Rayleigh and Zavala, I think, is a better backup could be a better backup than Tom Murphy. Listen, I think the Seattle Mariners, the question is who got better? Who got the most better?
Mm-hmm.
I think Seattle got the most. I think they got the most better of the division. I guess I look at it this way. I'm trying to talk my way through this. I think the Astros are a worse team today than they were at the end of the season. I think the Rangers are a worse team today than they were at the end of the season. I don't think you can question.
Let me stop you right there. The Rangers seem obvious. That seems like an obvious one. Go back to the Astros really quick. You said they're a worse team than they were. Why is that? Why are the Astros worse today than they were at the end of the 2020?
I mean, what did they add? They added Dylan Coleman and Victor Caratini. Josh Hader is obviously
Josh Hader to the bullpen, but what did they lose?
Yeah, I mean I guess that's a good question. Is
you
adding
could make a
Josh
Hader,
Hader?
You could make a point that some of these guys are a year older too. Like, we're not saying Jose Altuve is going to be bad. They just signed an extension, but Justin Verlander's a year older. What are they going to get from Lance McCullers? Is he going to miss the whole year? Is he going to be back? Is he going to get? I mean, you could make those arguments, but Kyle Tucker's in his prime. Yordan Alvarez in his prime. What's Alex Bregman going to look like in a walk year? They could be worse. It's just hard to look at it and see that it's clearly. But did they actually get meaningfully better? Like, that's a really tough one for me. That's a tough one for me to say. I feel great about.
I'll say this:
it's the best roster in the division, but
having watched the Houston Astros play the Seattle Mariners 19 times, or I guess it was 13 last year, but I've watched Martin Maldonado on that team 40 times in the last 3 years. I think he is going to be a bigger loss in controlling the run game than I think people think. Now, Diaz and Caratini, fine, but they're by no means the defenders that Martin Maldonado was. And I think he genuinely did stop the run game for teams, that nobody ran against him. So I think the Houston Astros are going to have a bit of a hole behind the plate. Josh Hader makes the team better, but that was their only move. I would like to throw it back to you because I think you and I both agree it's clearly between the Astros and the Mariners as to who got better. Do you have a feeling one way or the other?
It's tough. It's tough. But I think at the end of the day, I think it's clearly Seattle did the most to get better. They improved the most. I mean, you say, well, they traded Jared Kelenic, who was almost a 2-win guy last year, even though he missed some time. And then they let Teoscar walk and they traded Eugenio Suarez. But when you look at what they did to get better, and then even when you look at it from a net standpoint, Jorge Polanco, Mitch Garver, Luke Rayleigh, Gregory Santos, assuming that he's healthy enough to pitch the majority of the season, and they kept everything else intact. I mean, they did the most to get better. So they didn't go out and like trade Logan Gilbert to add to the offense where we have to be like, well, okay, their offense got better, but their rotation got where they didn't do any of that. So they essentially are replacing Eugenio Suarez with guys that are just going to make more contact. as well. So it's just going to look a little different is all. They might get very similar offensive production out of Luis Urias and Josh Rojas at third base than they got from Eugenio Suarez a year ago. So when you're looking at improvement, I think it's very clear that it's Seattle. I was just surprised when I was thinking about this that that's where I landed. Because Texas, what did Texas do? I mean, right now, so far, they've lost Jordan Montgomery. They could go out and add him, but they added a hurt pitcher in Tyler Mahle, plus a pair of relievers in Kirby Yates, so you don't know what you're going to get. David Robinson's like the ageless wonder, but everything else is coming from within. They just didn't do a whole lot. They get a full year of Evan Carter, and Wyatt Langford probably shows up during the year and mashes, and they're hoping Jacob deGrom and Max Scherzer show up sometime over the summer, but that was the extent of their winter so far. So it can't be Texas. And it certainly isn't the Angels. They're losing Ohtani and barely doing anything else. It just
put the period they lost Ohtani.
Right.
And Oakland, for all Oakland is, they added pieces on the fringes. And I like Ross Stripling. But
let's talk about the A's for a second, because the next question we like to ask ourselves is who improved themselves the least? Now, I don't think it's the Astros. I think they did do a few things. I don't necessarily even think it's the Rangers. I think it's between the Angels and the A's. And I almost asked you, Joe, do you want to remove the A's from the equation? But it's, even if we did, it's not going to change my answer, because like you look at let's just talk about the A's. They're not winning anything. We know that, but they went out and they got Ross Stripling and Alex Wood and Trevor Gott and a couple of pieces for the roster, see if they pop guys that are more bench types like Abraham Toro and Miguel Andujar might actually get a chance to start. And he has a little bit of well, it's not much, and it's clearly more than what the Halos have done at this point. The Angels went out and essentially so far have signed Robert Stevenson to their bullpen and basically nothing else. Like, that team is worse this year by far, more so than any of the other teams in the division, maybe even in the American League. They've done the least to improve. And a lot of this is losing Ohtani, but they've just done so little to make that team better. At least the A's went out and got themselves some pieces to put out a sort of kind of viable product, compared to what they put out last year. They at least have a chance to be a little bit more competitive. The Angels just did nothing.
Is that what you're really going for, though? I mean, is Oakland really going for
no? But the question is, who did the most to improve their team? The Angels signed Robert Stevenson, and that's it. What did they do? Right?
I mean, how much better are they? Starting,
the key word is improvement here.
Yeah, if you're starting at, I mean, where they started, if you add a Ross Stripling, they're infinitesimally better. With all due respect to Oakland, like Alex Wood and Ross Stripling are their number 1 and number 2, and that may change with Morales. Yeah. They got Blackburn, sure. He's been celebrated for reasons I will never understand, just because he's the quote unquote ace for Oakland. Nothing against Paul Blackburn.
He's the ace.
He's a
and nothing against Blackburn. They should have traded him already, right? But the point is like improvement, right? What else did the Angels do? What did they do? Is Robert Stevenson more of an improvement to the Angels? Even if you remove the Ohtani part of the equation, you just go, okay, Ohtani gone. What are the Angels? And now they've added Robert Stevenson.
Oakland,
the A's did more, right? So the Angels did less, or are you saying Texas did less?
I'm not saying the Angels did less. I'm saying the Athletics got better. They got, I'll do it again. They got Mo better than the Angels did. That you cannot remove Shohei Ohtani from your organization and convince me of any moves that will convince me that they are a better team than they were in 2023. The Oakland Athletics are objectively better in 2024 than they were in 2023. And I would argue the Oakland Athletics offseason really isn't written until August 3rd, when the trade deadline is behind us. Like, that's what you're investing in capital.
I think it's written on March 28th, to be honest with you. But I see what you're getting at.
You know what I mean?
They're a team rebuilding. Every transaction cycle is big for them, and that's pretty much the next one.
So hold on.
Compare the Angels. Go ahead.
Before we do this, I want to circle back to Seattle, because I want to talk more about how much better is a team when they make so many moves in volume. So let's talk about quickly what they added, because I don't think we really did a good job of that. They added Luke Raley, Mitch Haniger, Mitch Garver, and Jorge Polanco,
Luis Urias,
and I think that's pretty much
Well, Sebi
those
Zavala,
five.
Gregory
Sebi Zavala,
Santos.
also Gregory Santos. I forgot. So that's
Provided they didn't
7 players.
Yeah.
7 players. Now, importantly, they lost Jose Caballero, Robbie Ray, Justin Topa.
Robbie Ray, who wasn't going to pitch for them until at least August.
Sure.
Right.
Justin Topa. Some prospects in Bowen and Gabriel Gonzalez, Marco Gonzalez. I didn't mention anybody.
Jared Kelnick was traded away.
Jared Kelnick, who is now apparently a platoon guy in Atlanta.
I'm shocked.
I talk about the guys that they lost: Topa, Kelnick. I guess we won't include Robbie Ray for the 2024 narrative. It feels to me like Seattle added like 3 or 4 pieces that make the team better, and they really only lost maybe 2 in Topa, maybe Kelnick, that make the team worse. And then I just because we did it with the Mariners, I want to do it with the Astros. What did they add? They added Hader, they added Caratini, and they lost Maldonado. So is Hader more valuable? Let's say it's a wash between Maldonado and Caratini, just for the sake of the conversation. Is adding Hader more significant than adding Haniger, Rayleigh, Santos?
No.
For me, it's
I'm already out. I'm already out. Adding an everyday player, a guy that plays 100 games even, that can be a 2.5 win guy in 100 games or 120 games, is more valuable than adding Josh Hader. In a vacuum, it's more valuable than adding Josh Hader.
And importantly, because it's the industry, Seattle didn't spend $100 million on a relief pitcher.
Right.
That generally doesn't age well.
I think we've talked about this. Houston's got $60 million wrapped up in their bullpen, dude. And until Seattle went out and signed Ryan Stanek, who's another addition that we haven't talked about yet, until they did that, the Mariners had $8.2 million in their bullpen. The Rangers have $25 million wrapped up in their bullpen. I mean, this is really a comment on how Jerry Dipoto and Justin Hollander put together their bullpens. They still have under $13 million committed to their bullpen when the Astros are at 60. But
you know what's crazy? They spent $60 million on their bullpen, and they somehow lost Hector Neris, Phil Maton, and Ryan Stanek. Like, they lost a good chunk of their bullpen, and they still owe $60 million in there.
Yeah, it's crazy. Montero, Abreu, Presley, Hader make a lot of money because they're
very good. They're very, very good.
It's
a better bullpen than Seattle, no doubt.
It is. Yeah, and they're healthier right now too. So we'll see how that pans out. If everybody's healthy, you can argue the two are very similar, but you got to have, I mean, there's some question about that in Seattle right now, of course. If you're comparing the Rangers and the Angels, obviously the Rangers better team, like absolute loaded lineup. And the rotation isn't bad. It's not impactful, I would say, but it's certainly not bad. Uvalde was pretty good last year. Even in his down years, he's still a viable, number 4. Dane Dunning can do his thing, a very efficient guy. They got some guys that can pitch. John Gray, legitimate mid-rotation starter at the big league level. They just don't have the impact, and they're hoping that it's Max Scherzer and Jacob deGrom over the summer. But when you look at what the two teams did, Angels and Rangers, forget what made sense and what didn't. It's puzzling to me that we're sitting here talking about the Angels doing just as much as the Rangers to get better. And that's not a shot at the Rangers. They already were in a good place. I understand what they're doing. I do not get what the Angels are doing right now. The fact that David Robertson is the extent of their winter is just so strange to me. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever, Joe.
I don't know what the Angels are doing. I mean, they got Matt Moore, they got Robert Stevenson. That bullpen was already in a pretty bad place. The rotation is, there's some guys in that rotation, but assuming they're going to stay healthy, I have a hard time believing it.
Who's the number 1 starter for them?
It's got to be Detmers.
Patrick Sandoval?
I love Sandoval. I really do. I think he's a good player. I think he isn't reliable in that he can't stay healthy. And honestly, Detmers he was a pretty good player last year. Like, I would and he was homegrown. Like,
I'm a big Detmers fan. Always have been. But it's basically, it's Sandoval, it's Tyler Anderson, it's Reed Detmers, it's Griffin Canning, Soriano, Silseth. I guess Andrew Wantz is a guy they want to include in that rotation conversation at this point. But they have a chance if they get any luck to have a pretty good bullpen. Estevez, Matt Moore, Adam Simber, give him a different look there. Luis Garcia is there. They have a chance. And what has Ben Joyce able to give them, from a prospect
Sam
standpoint?
Bachman. It's interesting that they sent Sam Bachman back to the minor leagues to continue starting.
Yeah,
it tells you how desperate they were. But another thing to mention, this whole conversation is who got better. I'm not saying David Fletcher was any sort of impactful player, but he had a role.
Mm-hmm.
You lose David Fletcher, you lose Max Stassi, you lose Gio Urshela, you lose Will Smith. No, Will Smith was with the Rangers. I mean, they didn't replace a lot of those guys. And I know that you're counting on some of these guys that have come up the ladder to be healthy. Mm-hmm. The Angels have been the most brittle team in baseball for the last 3 or 4 years. It feels like an incomplete winter.
And to be honest with you, that's a good point, Joe, and we'll move on from here. But that might be a bigger, impact point, so to speak, than the rotation even is. Can Anthony Rendon and Mike Trout give them 250 games between them? Because if they do, then the rotation thing matters. If those guys aren't healthy, they don't even have a lineup to support a good rotation. So what the hell's the point? So that's a difficult one. And I'm just really surprised they didn't do more. All right. From a general manager, from a president of baseball operations standpoint, we've run into some divisions where it's like there really isn't anyone on the hot seat. And I think that's probably the case here. But if we remove the hot seat and just make it hottest, which general manager is probably under the most pressure right now that has the warmest seat? For me, it's pretty obvious, but it shouldn't be.
Yeah, I mean, I think you and I agree. I think it's Jerry Dipoto, and that comes maybe we disagree, but that comes with tenure. Mm-hmm. We don't agree. Interesting. I think with Jerry, a couple of things. One, he's in his contract year. That automatically puts you on the hot seat as you are not under contract for 2025. That's something that needs to be rectified. I believe it needs to be rectified. I think Jerry deserves another contract. I think he should get 2 or 3 more years, especially because he's done ownership's bidding in Seattle without getting an expanded payroll for the better part of 4 or 5 years now. He's not under contract. He's going on year 7, year 8 with the organization. That's a long time. Only 1 playoff appearance. I think if Seattle comes out this season and just scuffles with all of the aggressive moves that he made this winter, really reshuffling the deck, if Seattle somehow comes out and puts together a 76, 77 win season, I think you could see the team move on, especially if it includes a slow start and he's not under contract going into the All-Star break. I think it could include a reshuffling of the front office, but I hope it doesn't happen because I think he's done the most with what he's been provided.
You answered this at the top of your statement there. Jerry Dipoto is not getting fired. They're not going to not renew his contract. That's not happening. If there's no Jerry Dipoto in Seattle in 2025, it's because Jerry Dipoto is tired of the BS in Seattle. Now, I never sit here and think that's the best move for a gentleman. There are only 30 of these jobs. And Jerry Dipoto has already been through one team and didn't really push out the greatest tone when he left LA. There was a lot of belief that he was a problem and that it wasn't Artie Moreno, because you don't get owner, information all that much. So Jerry leaving a second team on his own isn't going to look good. He may never get another front office job again. But I think that's the only way he's gone in Seattle. But you answered it. It's because he's been doing the owner's bidding, I think is the way you put it. They pulled the rug out from under a Jerry Dipoto plan 3 times since they started rebuilding. 3 freaking times. There's no way he's on the hot seat from a front office performance standpoint for me. There's absolutely no way. Maybe there's some personality things going on there that would push him out the door, but I think ultimately it's going to be up to Jerry Dipoto. Because if you're John Stan and you're that ownership group in Seattle and you're thinking, what's the best way for us to make money? Well, it's to have a decent team, a relevant team that generates buzz and we sell season tickets and we get ratings on TV without having to spend a bunch of money. And Jerry Dipoto might be as skilled as any general manager in baseball at doing that right now, outside of everybody that seems to go to Tampa, right? Like that seems to be where Seattle is at this point. The A's aren't firing David Forst. The Astros just hired Dana Brown. The Rangers just won the World Series. To me, it's Moreno and the Angels with Minasian. I don't believe he deserves it, but because it's Moreno, I think he's probably got the warmest seat. If Moreno's going to keep the team, and it sounds like he is, I think Minasian's got the warmest seat. But I do think you could have a couple of GM changes at the end of the year if things go a certain way, and Seattle is one of them. But I do think it would be Dipoto Joe walking away. I just don't see how you can fire, and not renewing his contract is essentially firing him. So I just don't see how you can go through what you just went through, put him through what you put him through, and then essentially fire him. It would be it would be worse than Jerry saying 54%. It wouldn't be taken as bad, but it would be worse.
I was going to say, according to Twitter, it would be fine. But yeah, I'm with you. I think he's done a stand-up job with the bullets that he's been provided on the Mariners front office situation. I do wonder, with how frugal and frankly cheap that ownership group has been, I wonder if John Stanton and that ownership group doesn't look at, oh, well, we have a general manager in waiting in Justin Hollander. I'm sure he would love to just kind of take on more responsibility, and we could shed ourselves of the, I don't know how much money Jerry Dipoto makes. Let's say it's $2.5 million. We could shed ourselves of that and give Justin a promotion and let him hire someone from within. And anyways, it isn't out of the realm of possibilities, especially with, Jerry Dipoto has had some health issues. He's gotten a little bit older as he kind of works himself 15, 16 hours a week. Maybe it's time, maybe he wants to step down and spend more time with his family, but that's all things that we don't know. But I did want to double back on the Perry Minasian thing. I think a lot of people in the industry looked at when he was given that job entering, I think it was the 2022 season, as, is this a bridge GM? He's very young. He's having to navigate the Shohei Ohtani experience, if you will. Ultimately, he wasn't able to keep him in town. And in the process of that, and I do believe this was Artie Moreno's bidding, he ended up moving the few prospects that were worth a damn in that organization. And now he's stuck with an aging Trout, an aging and unhappy Anthony Rendon, and absolutely no farm system. So I wonder, does Artie Moreno does he feel as though Perry Minasian is credentialed enough to rebuild a farm system like some other general managers have? I don't know. If he doesn't believe he's the man for that job, then, Perry could certainly go.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm with you there. He does have some experience in those areas, but that doesn't necessarily mean he's going to be able to do it. By the way, Minasian's been there since prior to the 21 season. So he's had 3 full goes of it. They hired him in November of 2020. So I could see that seat being the warmest. The stuff in Seattle is just so weird. It's not really about front office performance, really. It's about everything else other than that, which is weird, but you make good points there. For sure. All right. Who wins this division? If you had to pick who wins this division, the American League West in 2024.
So I'm going to go with Houston. I think Houston still has enough ammunition in its rotation, and I think it's the best bullpen in the division. I question whether or not Seattle has done enough to stay afloat at a high level defensively, and whether or not that bullpen is going to stay healthy enough to win them the one-run games that they have to win. And with Texas, I still think Texas is going to win like 90 games. I think Houston's going to win 91 or 92, and I think Seattle's going to win 87 to 88. My thing with Texas is I think if they had a more imposing rotation, they would be automatic for me. I just don't think that they're going to be the 6.5 run bludgeoning lineup that they were for much of 2023. So I'll go with Houston. Texas is a close second. Texas is going to need Jacob deGrom and Max Scherzer at the tail end of 2024 if they hope to win another ring. And then I think Seattle, because of their rotation and if they're able to keep their bullpen healthy throughout the season, I actually think Seattle is a better postseason bet than Houston or Texas. I would not want to play Seattle in the postseason if all things are equal today.
Yeah, the one thing I'm worried about with Seattle is not Mitch Haniger. I'm not even counting on Mitch Haniger. In my estimations, I almost say Haniger's going to play like 20 games. I don't have any expectations of Mitch Haniger whatsoever. right field for me is about Dom Canzone. That's kind of the way I'm thinking about it. Anything they get from Haniger is like a bonus. But you do worry about the pitching depth there. With the injuries, what's the Brash situation going to look like? Are you going to get anything out of him at all? What's the Santos thing look like? How much do you get out of him? You got to worry about injuries piling up there. Other than that, I think Seattle's right there with Houston. If we could assume right now that Brash gives them a healthy second half of the season and Santos is good to go on like May 1, and no other significant injuries to either team, I think Seattle's just as good as the Houston Astros. But I'm picking Houston too. Here's my question to you. If the Astros need to go out and get some impact, it's somewhere, anywhere, that rotation. I mean, Verlander is going to start the season on the IL. He's 116 years old. He's 5 years older than I am. Can they do it? Do they have the pieces to actually go get even a 2-month rental at the top of the rotation? I'm not sure who's going to be out there, but just in general, do they have that? They made big deals last year, in the last several years. That farm system is not very good. Jacob Melton's their top prospect. They're not a lot of, they're a bunch of 45 roles in that top 10, Joe. I'm looking at your top 10 of the Astros right now. Melton's the only 50 role you gave someone. That's not a deep system. That they don't have a whole lot of impact there to trade. Would they be able to go out and do that if they need that? Because there's certainly a chance that's going to be the missing piece for them.
Yeah, so I would push back and say I think the Astros have enough in their rotation. Verlander will be back. Framber, Christian Javier, Urquidy, Luis Garcia. I think they're going to try and start Hunter Brown, and Lance McCullers is probably going to be back on the mound in the middle of July. So, that gives you 7 or 8 good arms with JP France as an option as well. But to answer your question, do they have the guys that can actually, like, let's say they need an outfielder, let's say they need a first baseman because Jose Abreu finally fell off the cliff. I think they do. I think they've got some pitching prospects that are so young into their professional careers that they could flip a guy for, 3 months of so-and-so or a year and a half of so-and-so. Like, sure. I'm a big fan of Michael Knorr. I'm a big fan of Joey Loperfido in the outfield, but the kid to know in Houston is Jake Bloss. I think he was their 3rd round pick this year. I think you could get a pretty good deal on some of these 2023 draftees that just haven't proven their mettle yet. So I think they could do it, especially for a rental.
Yeah, we know Seattle has enough on the farm to go do some things. Texas certainly has enough young talent to go do some things in the rotation if they want to. Really interesting division. Really.
Can we say one thing really quick? How impactful, because, oh my God, was it impactful? Was it for the Texas Rangers to land the number 4 pick in the 2023 draft in the lottery? Yeah. I mean,
yeah,
that lottery with Wyatt Langford going to Texas appears to be, and I don't ever use this lightly, franchise altering, like decade altering for the Texas Rangers. They may have gotten, Wyatt Langford looks like one of the best players on the planet this spring. Mm-hmm. He looked like he was ready for pro ball in the 3 months that he played, in the minor leagues last year. He could start the, season on opening day. That changed everything for that organization. What were they expected to get? I'm trying to remember. Wasn't it like 9?
Yeah, it wasn't top 5. Yeah.
No.
Yeah, it wasn't top 5 for sure.
Or 11 or something.
Right. And that's probably, to be honest with you, that's probably a little bit of a flaw in the system. I'm not complaining about it. It's just probably a little flaw in the system. Texas is in the Dallas market. That's not a market you should be handing top 5 draft picks to. Like, yeah, it was luck, but that's not really the whole idea of the draft to begin with. And that's not really the idea of the draft lottery to begin with. So don't really love that, but whatever, they did it. They picked the right guy, it seems like, as well. So it does take some skill there. So they didn't luck into Langford. They lucked into the opportunity and they took advantage of it. So I have to give the Rangers some credit. Are you worried at all about Corey Seager just in general? Like, we know he's got the core thing, the groin thing. Like, how much does that concern you, and how much does that kind of wipe off a win or two off the top of your projection for them?
It worries me a lot. I'll use proximity bias. We watched in 2022 Mitch Haniger deal with this with a core abdominal injury, and it kept him out, and it kept him weak. More importantly, he was weak in the 2022 season. It kept him out for a lot of that season, and it was one of his worst seasons from an offensive impact standpoint. And then, in Seattle, Dylan Moore had the same thing last year, and he had 2 setbacks, and I don't think we saw him until the middle of June. And the surgery was at a similar place.
And he wasn't any good until like August at all.
He did not get his footing until summer. So I think Chris Young, I think the Texas Rangers will tell you he's going to be ready for opening day. He's going to be fully healthy, but that's one of those injuries that it's kind of like the hamate bone. Like that just seems to sap a lot of the explosiveness out of your operation offensively. And I do have questions on whether or not he's going to be able to be the player that they want him to be through, honestly, like the end of May, middle of June.
They should be able to absorb most of that with that lineup, though, right now. You might have I don't know. The first thing I think about when you think about Wyatt Langford, you have Evan Carter, you have Alex Garcia, you have Leota Taveras, you have Ezekiel Duran, you have some dudes, right? So like you're fine in terms of like you might have enough in your outfield that ultimately, I'm not saying today or even at the deadline necessarily, to move on from Garcia and actually get a player for him. Like if they get to that point, they may have the proven, reliable, high probability depth and impact to go move a player like that and get something they don't have right now. Yeah, Texas is kind of fascinating in that way. All right. We both like the Astros. We both think there are at least 2 playoff caliber teams in this division, maybe 3. Some risk there for everybody, especially Seattle. But is there a pivotal player in this division with the ability to do something that changes your answer to the last question? We both picked Houston. Is there a player in this division that could do something we believe they're actually capable of doing that makes us pick his team instead of the Houston Astros?
This feels like a layup.
It's a layup.
But it feels like an 8.5 win season, an 8-win season from Julio Rodriguez turns Seattle into a 94 win team.
Yeah.
And you cushion him with some of the veterans that should be able to move that lineup.
Mm-hmm.
If you couple an 8-win Julio Rodriguez with that rotation in Seattle, I mean that team could be very, very, very good. But he's only 23 years old. You never know if he's going to have that that standout year. But I think it's comfortably Julio Rodriguez could drive the bus in the AL West.
Yeah, absolutely. 155 games last year. He was a 5.9 F4 player, 275, 333, 485 with 37 stolen bases and 32 bombs. This is potentially a 40-40 player. Staying healthy is obviously key for every player. But it seems like just because it's Julio, because he's 23, because the trend is up, he's going to be a 6+ win guy. So getting to 7.5, 8 wins, 8.5 wins isn't that far of a stretch. Yeah, this one's obvious for me. We can talk about health all day long with it. Like if Mitch Haniger plays 150 games somehow or somehow gets to 600 plate appearances, that's going to be huge for Seattle, something we don't really see coming. I certainly am not going to predict that. Any day of the week, I'm not going to predict Mitch Haniger gets more than 300 plate appearances. Julio Rodriguez becoming an 8+ win player. I mean, at some point, we think that's going to happen, and it could be this year. There's a lot of Ronald Acuna Jr. in Julio Rodriguez. In the trajectory, and I'm not suggesting he's going to do
three more inches and 30 pounds.
Julio is pretty polarizing in that way, and I know he's made some swing adjustments this spring, and we'll see what happens. But that guy has every opportunity to win the MVP in the American. I mean, he does it. He's an 8-win player. If you told me right now Julio plays 150+ games and is an 8-win guy, I would bet he's the MVP. Not that doesn't mean someone else can't.
I don't know. It wouldn't be. I don't know if it would be close.
Yeah, it may not be close. But if you tell me Mike Trout also plays 150 games, might be close. You tell me Aaron Judge plays 150 games, it doesn't look like that's possible. Certainly close. But yeah, you tell me Julio's an 8-win guy, I'm laying some dough on that right now.
Can't imagine the Angels would win enough games, even with Mike Trout as an 8-win player, to have him unseat an 8-win Julio. And I do think that if Kyle Tucker were to become an 8-win player, which I also don't think is out of the realm of possibility. I think Kyle Tucker could be a 35-35 or maybe even a 40-40 guy. But yeah, especially with Julio Rodriguez's personality, and I think that the game wants Julio to become a face of Major League Baseball. Yeah, I think it'd be a slam dunk.
Yeah. Essentially the last couple of years, I know Tucker's, 3 years older than Julio, but essentially the last 2 years combined, Julio and Tucker have been the same hitter. It's
Mhm.
been the center field defense for Julio that's pushed him over the top in terms of value, in terms of wins above replacement. So there you go. It's really a 3-team race in that division. It doesn't look like the Angels have really any shot, and certainly the A's don't have any shot. All right, let's talk a little MLB draft. We do this every week. We talk about 3 weekend matchups in college baseball to watch. But before we do that, let's remind folks, Joe, that you built a really cool tool for folks that want to watch prospects. Tell people about that real quick, if you would.
Yep. If you go to futurestarseries.com at the top, you'll find a menu header that says HQ College Streaming or College Streaming HQ. You can find a link to every single game that is running through the APIs that we're pulling from, basically the backend that we're pulling them from. And we'll provide you a link to go watch every single game, assuming you have a subscription to whoever's hosting that game. But importantly, I think one of the hurdles for people getting into college baseball is they don't know what to watch. And so we have included every single prospect that is currently inside of our top 300 prospects at Future Star Series listed next to that game's link. So you can know who to look for, what to watch for, and, maybe find a team to attach yourself to.
Yeah, a lot of fun. College baseball remains the most underrated level of baseball from a pure entertainment and interest standpoint. It's magnificent. It's the one level, Joe, where I just watch it and I don't really talk about it as much. We talk about the draft, but I don't really talk about like what a great game that I don't really talk because that's my one, kind of avenue to kind of sit back, relax, watch the game, flip back and forth. ESPN Plus is pretty big in watching college games. Big Ten Network, SEC Network, stuff like that, big in watching college games. But it's if we get an opportunity to push it, I'm going to push it. I think that that streaming HQ that you built is pretty cool. It's a big weekend this weekend too, Joe.
Huge, yeah.
I'll add a few here at the top that didn't make our list of 3, but that are really obvious. Wake Forest at Virginia, because I think you watch Wake Forest every week.
I watch Virginia every week.
You watch LSU every week. They're at Mississippi State. Again, Wake and LSU you watch every week for obvious reasons. But let's start with Tennessee and Alabama. That's 2 top 15 teams with a pretty decent handful of prospects. Who do you like in that game? Who should folks be watching? Tennessee at Alabama.
Let's go in alphabetical order. Start with Alabama. Alabama has a starting pitcher by the name of Ben Hess, who has been one of the top 2 or 3 college pitchers in college baseball this year. He's been unstoppable. He will probably pitch Friday. He's been pitching Friday against Tennessee. This is going to be his best test. And it's an explosive fastball. It's a little bit of a relievery delivery, but it's a big slider. Changeup's there. This is a guy that I think is getting more and more chatter as a top 30 pick, a first-round guy. So, if you're looking for a college pitcher for your team to get invested in for the draft, Ben Hess is a good place to look. A guy that's going to make an enormous jump. In fact, now that we're here, I can tell you he's jumping 58 spots in the upcoming update, which we'll talk about. Ian Petritz is an outfielder for Alabama, having a gangbusters year so far, hitting absolutely everything, hitting tanks. He's jumping 58 spots in the next update. And then, there's some interesting guys for Alabama that I think are moving up a little bit. Pierce George is a Future Stars alumni, 6'7", 250-pound righty, mostly coming out of the bullpen, been up to 102 miles an hour. So he's, that's like what the 4th round reliever possible starting pitching prospect looks like. And then Gage Miller, who's a 2nd, 3rd baseman, sitting like 450. I don't know if he's anything more than like an 8th or a 9th round pick. But because the physical tools aren't crazy, but he's hitting 450. So pretty good guy to watch. Flip it over to Tennessee really quick. Another 1st round arm, Drew Beam. He's been on my top 30 all season. He's at 24 right now. Currently, he's at 23 right now. He's currently set to fall just 1 spot, mostly due to attrition. He's been excellent. He throws a ton of strikes, fastballs up to 98, tight slider, good changeup, really high floor college pitcher to watch. He'll be, I think, the Saturday guy for Tennessee. But the amount of bats that the Volunteers have that could go in the top 3 rounds is why I'm excited to watch Ben Hess try and navigate that lineup. Billy Amick is their third baseman. He's got like 10 homers. He's playing a really good third base. Christian Moore, super athletic second baseman. He's going to be jumping way up in my next board. And then Dylan Dreiling in the outfield, Kavaris Tears in the outfield, and Blake Burke at first base all rank on my upcoming update as top 5 round prospects.
Wow,
so that's
loaded,
5
Joe.
bats. That's 5 bats in the top 5 rounds that Ben Hess is going to have to navigate.
Dylan Dreiling, 377 with a 507 OBP and an 811 slug at 6 homers, 5 doubles. Billy Amick, 369 with 9 homers, a triple, and 4 doubles. You mentioned Christian Moore as well, second baseman. That's the one that really kind of piqued my interest.
Yeah.
6 homers, 6 doubles, hitting 364, 13 walks, 10 strikeouts. Can he run? I know he got 1 stolen base, but can he run? Because not a great athlete.
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
It's not that he's not a great athlete. It's just, he's 6'1", 215. Like he's a bulldog out there. So he's more bat than he is run.
Mm-hmm. You started this conversation with Drew Beam in 4 starts, 20 strikeouts, just 2 walks in his 4 starts and 21 and 2/3 innings. But he has given up 22 hits. I'm not sure if you've seen him or heard anything. Is this just a guy who's just around the zone a lot? It's not overpowering. It's not great stuff, but it's good, solid, average stuff. Or is this just him maybe working on stuff in the non-conference?
I think my guess is it would probably be the latter. I mean, if you look at what he's done in 2024, he shut down everybody up until last week. And I think it was a planned abbreviated start on the 9th against Lipscomb. 4 innings, 4 hits, 4 strikeouts, 2 walks. He only threw 74 pitches. I think he actually was just on a pitch count to try and work his way into SEC ball. But you look at his other starts. I mean, his opening week start, 4 innings, 1 hit. And then Valparaiso, 4 innings, 4 hits. And then against Indiana on the first, 5 innings, 1 hit, 10 strikeouts. So I would caution folks to not look too far into the non-conference stats, just because thank God we've gotten to the place where college coaches are letting these guys kind of grind into SEC play rather than, throwing 130 innings against Lipscomb.
Right. Because that kind of stuff used to happen. So that's Tennessee and Alabama. A lot of dudes there down in the SEC. Of course, let's stay in the SEC. How about Texas A&M and Florida? Depending on whose rankings you look at, Joe, these are 2 top 10 teams. I think Texas A&M is 4 and Florida is 8, if I'm not mistaken. That's down in Gainesville. Tell us who to watch there. Got another FSS alum leading Texas A&M right now, don't we?
We'll get to Texas A&M in a minute. I got to go alphabetical. Jack Caglione.
Hang on, time out. Let's cut in this for a second. Here's something really funny. I know 2 things about you that I didn't know 3 weeks ago. Number 1, you like to do things alphabetically. You're like Brian Regan, the comic,
process oriented.
And number 2, you are a huge used to be closet Royals fan. Those are the 2 things that I've learned about Joe Doyle the last couple of weeks. Please carry on, Mr. Alphabetical.
Oh, Billy Butler forever.
Billy Butler. Wow, that's a blast
Billy
from the
Butler
past.
forever.
All right, Florida. Start alphabetical. Do whatever you got to do. All right.
So we got to start with Jack Caglione. Okay, he's the most talented person on the planet. He's hitting .412. He's got 5 homers. He has just 7 strikeouts on the season. That is an enormous jump. He's looked great at the plate. He's still chasing outside of the zone, which is going to be nitpicked by scouts, but he's just not striking out. So 11 walks and just 7 strikeouts. But on the mound, I think the bigger story is he's starting to get some attention on the mound. The delivery looks cleaned up. He's got 3 starts. He's pitched 15 innings. He has 27 strikeouts and just 8 walks. Now, that is still, at best, fringy control. It's still not good. But the fact that he is putting all these hitters away he had 11 strikeouts against Miami. Yeah. And then St. Mary's and Columbia, he kind of chewed through. So Jack Caglione, for your viewing pleasure, he's the most entertaining player on the planet because you get to watch him on the mound on Sundays and you get to watch him bat Friday through Sunday. So he's the guy you're looking for. I think he's a top 10 pick. I think you can book it. But Colby Shelton is an infielder for Florida who plays a little bit of second, plays a little bit of third, plays a little bit of first. He's moving way up on my board for this upcoming release, up 57 spots.
Stop right there on Shelton. You said he's moving up 57 spots, hitting 333 with 9 homers. He does have 18 strikeouts, though. Is that the knock on him a little bit, the swing and miss?
It is, yeah. But I think importantly, he's looked better at third base than a lot of people gave him credit for. And he's played a little bit of shortstop, too. So I think actually he's now that I look at it, I've only seen him in late inning situations at shortstop. He started every game at shortstop for Florida this season after being largely a third baseman at Alabama last year. Right. So when you combine the up the middle defense, the power, there's a lot to kind of sell on, especially in a class that presently lacks up the middle dynamic players who impact the game. So Listen, I still don't think, I don't think Colby Shelton is going to be at least at this stage, a top 60 pick, but I do think he could eke his way into day one and probably represents a floor of like the 4th round. Beyond that, Luke Heyman is a powerful Florida catcher. I think he's like a 6th or 7th rounder. And then they've got a catcher, Brandon Neely, who I think will ultimately transition into a starting role at the next level, who I think is he's currently at 204 in my rankings. So another one to watch. But
can we go back to
Caglione
for a second? 7 strikeouts and 80 plate appearances. Considering the power he has, considering the potential two-way value he has. He had 58 strikeouts and 319 plate appearances last year. So he's clearly like on the right track, I'll say. I don't want to say he's significantly improved because we're basically just looking at non-con at this point. Is the swing and miss the single, most important thing for us to watch for with him as a player? Or is the thing with the mound development, is his development on the mound the biggest thing if you had to pick between the two?
I think most scouts are zeroing in on his offensive game, personally. I look at Caglione last year, and we talked about this on some previous episodes, but last year, Jack Caglione had a contact rate of 76%. He had a chase rate of 40% and a swing rate of nearly 60%, which was almost the top of college baseball. The crazy thing is he makes contact with like 70% of pitches out of the zone, which really speaks to the strength in his hands. I mean, he's so long that he can get to pitches off of the plate, and he's so strong and his hands are so strong that he can get to pitches boring in on his kneecaps. So I think the question marks surrounding whether or not he can actually hit are gone. He's always probably going to be an exceptionally aggressive hitter, but he's gifted, which it's not a term that's used in scouting too much, but he's just gifted. He can do things in the box that other players cannot do. So if there's one thing that I was looking at, if I would be looking at for Caglione this year, it's going to be just the pure bat to ball. I expect the chase rate to stay above 33% all season, but I just want to see that out of zone contact rate continue to stay hot and work deep counts and impact the baseball, which he's done.
Right. It seems like he does that without trying a whole lot. And maybe he's toned it down a little bit just to make more contact. I don't know. I haven't seen it, but the numbers might suggest, as a small sample of 16 games, that's what he's doing a little bit, at least early on, to kind of get into this. I'm trying to hit the ball and the home runs will come. They hit 33 home runs last year in 71 games, for crying out loud. What a fun player. One more thing on have you figured out yet why the first N in his last name is silent?
No.
Can we just figure that
Irish,
out?
Man.
Like, come on.
I'm Irish.
I
have learned in my 34 years on this planet as an Irishman to stay out of that.
I just want to know answers to everything. It's a great last name, whether you pronounce both N's or not. And obviously the first N is not, it's silent. The N is silent. It's just the weirdest thing. Love it. All right. Texas A&M has at least 3-4 guys that are interesting, including a potential top half of the first round guy, maybe.
Yeah. So Braden Montgomery he's jumping up 10 spots. I hate being wrong when Jeremy is right. Jeremy Booth told me coming into this year, Braden Montgomery's the dude, and he's got a shot to go 1-1, and I should pay more attention. And I said, Jeremy, he's not making contact with anything. He's swinging through everything. He can't hit as a right-handed batter. Well, I mean, Jason, if you have the numbers in front of you, go ahead and lay them out, because I'll tell you, as you look those up, he's jumping up from number 16 all the way to number 6 in my upcoming draft rankings update, and he might tick higher than that as the spring goes.
Yeah, his numbers, we'll compare it to last year. So last year at Stanford, in 64 games and 310 plate appearances, he struck out 64 times, 51 walks, and had the 17 homers, and can steal a base now and again, and hit 336 last year. This year he's hitting over 400. Again, it's just 17 games in, mostly non-con here, but he already has 7 bombs and 6 doubles, 12 strikeouts, and 81 plate appearances to go with 17 walks. So it does seem to have improved, that he's swinging and missing less. I'm not sure what the chase rates look like, and I don't know what the splits look like exactly from the right side. But very, very interesting first 17 games for Braden Montgomery, and he certainly looks like a potential future star.
Yeah, I mean, I tweeted about this a couple of weeks ago, and it's gotten even louder since. He had 4 balls in 2023 hit over 110 miles an hour. 110 miles an hour. He's done that 7 times at Texas A&M, and it's barely the middle of March.
Yeah.
And
so he's also a former two-way guy. I think he's throwing an inning for Texas A&M this year. There's no question his future is playing in the outfield somewhere, probably right field with that big arm and swinging the bat though, right?
I mean, Braden Montgomery, and I'm not just kind of throwing a superlative on him, he could have one of the top 3 arms in professional baseball when he's drafted. It's an unbelievable arm in right field. And when you couple that with, above average speed and the impact that he's showing, I think some sites had him as high as 9. He's certainly creeping up higher on our board. He's jumping 10 spots. I think there's a chance that Braden Montgomery, to Jeremy Booth's approval, could jump up on the board as high as like 3 or 4 by the time this season is over. And the crazy thing is, dude, he's doing it from the left side, he's doing it from the right side. He looks like a legitimate switch hitter at the next level. I think he's going to always be better as a lefty, but he looks capable. Yeah.
When you talk about him getting to 3-4, let's talk about that from a mock draft sort of standpoint. Not a player ranking sort of standpoint.
Yeah.
What are the chances a team like Cleveland or Cincinnati at 1 or 2 just pop Montgomery? We know that the best player doesn't always go number 1, and maybe he's not the best player, but what are the chances one of those 2, or even the Rockies, I guess, at 3 pop Montgomery?
I don't know. I think Colorado at 3 makes a lot of sense with what they've targeted in the past, and that strong arm in Coors has always kind of been a priority for Bill Schmidt and that entire front office going back a long time. Do I think that Cleveland would pull the trigger at 1? Like, maybe, especially in a year where there isn't a lot of dynamic players up the middle of the field. I think it's kind of difficult to say that Braden Montgomery is a better prospect than Travis Bazzana at this stage. Mm-hmm. But as you know, Jason, at the top of any draft, it's, how much value can we get and how much savings can we consider alongside it. So if you're telling me Braden Montgomery at 1 is willing to take a $1 million haircut to go first overall to Cleveland, I think they would, of course, consider that. I mean, you give a team $1 million to spend in the 2nd and 3rd and 4th round and spread out some of that wealth that Cleveland landed in by landing the number 1 pick. You could do way worse than Braden Montgomery with the first pick. I think he'd certainly be in consideration if he keeps this up.
Yeah, he's fun to watch. I adore his the finish on his left-handed swing. That's a lot of fun. By the way, I get the feeling that you spend a lot of money on your haircuts.
I'm always wearing a hat in this podcast.
But you like the
term.
You like the term $1 million haircut. So
yeah.
So that's 3 things I've learned about you in the last few weeks.
It's my retirement plan, Jason, is someone hands me $1 million haircut.
Maybe we can be friends one day. I'm starting to learn about you. It's pretty great. Texas A&M has a couple of other guys that people should at least keep an eye on, not necessarily top guys, but talk about guys like Cortez and Camarillo and guys like that at Texas A&M, or maybe somebody's popped too.
Yeah, someone's popped. That's kind of been the thing. So there was a guy that was unranked in our last board who is jumping. He's like the third or fourth highest jumper in this update, up 183 spots from 301, quote unquote, to number 118. And it could change a few spots between now and Monday, but Ryan Prager is a left-handed pitcher, and you should pull up these stats while I read about him. Ryan Prager is a 6'3", 200-pound lefty, metric darling, big curveball, fastball with tons of carry through the zone. He'll generally sit 90 to 92, but he's been up a little bit higher than that. And it's been largely fringe average command. But his pitch design, like his pitch plots, they're among the best in college baseball. He can really work the ball to both sides of the plate and shape it how he wants. But I'll stop waxing poetic. Go ahead and read off how he's doing this season.
So 6'3", 200-pound left-hander. In 4 starts, 23 and 2/3 innings, 9 hits, no runs, earned or not, and a 40-3 strikeout to walk ratio. He's given up 2 extra base hits, both doubles. There's no wild pitches to his record. He's only hit 1 batter, 3 walks, and 1 hit batter in 23 and 2/3 innings of scoreless baseball. That is remarkable.
And 40 strikeouts.
40 strikeouts.
It's not like he's just getting soft contact. He's putting people away. So I'm going to watch Prager closely in this series. It's going to be a really good test for him against Florida. But yeah, I mean, I think if Ryan Prager was like 93 to 94, touching 97, like right now he's mostly 91 to 92, touching 4. Mm-hmm. If this guy was 3 to 4, touching 7, I think we're talking about a top 20 pick. Mm-hmm. But for now, having not seen the SEC yet, we'll put him in the 3rd round and see how high he can climb.
Yeah. Is it really just about like he maintains everything else? Is this really just about being able to be to kind of climb the ladder a little bit with the fastball? Is that really the only thing that's been missing so far?
I mean, in his career, it's mostly been command issues. If you go back and look at what he's done coming into this year, last year he had a 5.16 ERA, 59 innings, 53 strikeouts, 25 walks. So it's, fringy control, fringy command. He gave up 61 hits in 59 innings. He got, hit around a little bit, a 1.45 whip. So, he was a middling college starter last year, but the pitch design stuff always pointed toward, fastball that carries over the top rail, curveball with banger shape, slider in the low 80s that can really sweep, and he can pronate and flip over a changeup to right-handed hitters. And he's missing bats with that pitch too. So 4 pitches, left-handed. Like I said, the only thing this guy is really missing right now, because it appears the control and command have ticked up, is the velocity. And who knows if that won't show up by the end of the season.
Yeah. Chris Cortez, another guy that you had in your top 300 at one point. He's appeared in 5 games, 3 of them starts, 15 and 2/3 innings, 3 earned runs, 8 walks, but does have 22 strikeouts. Is this a reliever profile at this point, or does Cortez have a chance to straighten that out and stick in the rotation?
Yeah, I mean, the guy Cortez has always had sensational arm talent. The fastball, a lot of ride through the zone, up to 99 in the past. Slider that misses a ton of bats, though. He's mostly a 2-trick pony, and I think if Cortez is going to get back into the rotation out there, he's going to have to throw a bit more strikes. So good arm talent, fast arm, physical player, probably a day 2 pick just because of how hard he can throw. But yeah, I'd like to see him get back on pitching on Sundays.
That is Texas A&M and Florida. Let's move on to the final matchup. It's Clemson and Duke. Since we're doing alphabetical order here. Tell us about the Clemson kids.
Yeah, the guy to know here, really I don't want to say the only guy, but the big guy to know here is Will Taylor. He's an outfielder for Clemson, 5'11", 185. This is a guy that was going to be a top 15 pick in 2021. I heard a lot of numbers, including $4.5 million thrown his way. He wanted to play football. He wanted to play 2 sports at Clemson. He's done as much, but he tore his ACL at some point earlier in his Clemson 2-sport career, and he's totally given up football. So he has gotten very, very physical. He's still not the biggest guy at 5'11", but you're talking about an above-average runner that's finding a ton of barrels, can play center field in a pinch, probably a left fielder or right fielder at the next level. He's going to move up considerably as well. He's had a really nice start to this season. He's jumping up 7 spots right now in the update that comes out Monday, and he'd be a name that I would certainly be watching if you're trying to keep track of guys that could go in the first round.
Yeah, 5 homers and about 50 plate appearances. So about 55 plate appearances. So certainly stepping it up there, and it looks like he can run a little bit as well. Center fielders are kind of my thing. Like everybody loves shortstops and like center fielders. You know, historically, I usually like the athletic outfielder just as much as I do the middle in 3. Sounds like somebody that I'm gonna like. Tell us about what Duke brings to the table in this game and why we should be watching from the Duke standpoint.
Yeah, we've talked a lot about Jonathan Santucci, and he's going to be their Friday guy. He remains a first-round pick. He just continues to perform. So you know about Santucci. He'll be there on Friday, probably a first-round pick. The guy that I would probably turn you on to would be Devin Obie, who is either a center fielder or a left fielder at the next level. We'll see. He's a very, very physical kid. He's already hit a ball 112 miles an hour this year, and he clocks double-plus run times. Barrel consistency has been hit or miss, and there's not a ton of value in terms of like pure defensive ability, but the raw tools are off the charts. He's going to be making a pretty big jump in this upcoming update, and he looks like a guy that could go in the first 5 or 6 rounds as well.
Interesting. That was Devin Obie, who's hitting 383 with 8 extra base hits. He's got 4 stolen bases too.
He can jet.
Yeah, he can jet 6'2". 215. That's an interesting athlete. Really quick on Santucci. He's made 4 starts, 19 2/3 innings, 5 earned runs, 35 strikeouts, 10 walks. I look at those 10 walks and I go, that's not great, but it is early. And sometimes, and I don't have his game log in front of me, sometimes you walk 5 guys in one game and then 5 guys in the other 3. Is that pretty much the case here? He's struggled just a little bit with general control early on?
Yeah, it's mostly been streaky. It's been 2 or 3 here and there, and they seem to kind of come in the same inning. Listen, like at the end of the day, he hasn't been a guy that's really struggled with control in the past, and I don't think it's going to continue. But the fact that he's a left-handed pitcher and he's been up into the mid-90s and he's got 3 pitch, he hasn't even showed the changeup yet. I mean, it's been almost exclusively fastball slider up until we get into ACC play. Then he'll start flashing that really good changeup. He's in the exact same spot that he was in regardless of the 10 walks. And I think most people expect that those to kind of iron themselves out as we get into conference play.
Yeah, I pulled it up while we were talking. He does have a 10 strikeout game against Northwestern and a 14 strikeout game against Akron. And then it looks like he struggled last week against Wake Forest. So looking to rebound, but 2 walks, 3 walks, 2 walks, 3 walks. So it wasn't really the one big game. It was just a little bit here and there. 6'2", 205. So not big time physical projection here, but this is a guy who, like, the stuff suggests he can pitch in a big league rotation pretty soon.
Yeah, I mean, it's not too dissimilar to what Jordan Wicks was in 2022, and he went like 16 or 17 to the Cubs. Sure. I think that's kind of what you're looking at here. You're looking at Santucci going to a team that's looking for a little bit of safety from the left-handed side, probably in that 15 to 25 range.
Interesting. And those are the 3 matchups this week. So if you want to check out other guys, other prospects, other top prospects, go to futurestarseries.com and click on the link in the menu that says Draft Prospects Streaming HQ. Joe, if I'm not mistaken, you have a draft rankings update. We like to call them boards here, but you have one coming. What exactly is that update, and when is that going to hit the pages at futurestarseries.com?
Yep. So big draft update coming on Monday. It'll probably be early Monday morning, but the entire top 300 is getting a refresh. And importantly, at this stage in every spring, there will now be a function to sort by how many spots a guy moved up. So if it's a guy that moved up at least 15 spots, you'll be able to see that jump.
Interesting. Lots of fun. Going to be interested. I keep that bookmark, so I'll have to update that when the new update comes out because I use it anytime I'm looking up players. Sometimes I just need general information. Sometimes I want a little bit more. Those draft boards have a little of everything. Hey, I'm going to be out next week. Joe's going to carry you next week. So you get 3 more matchups next week. An NL East preview coming next week and whatever the hell Joe feels like talking about next week. And I'll be back the week after. Until then, follow Joe on Twitter at Joe Doyle MILB. I'm at Prospect Insider. That's on the former Twitter. And like I said, Joe will be back next week. So we'll talk then. Joe, appreciate it. We'll talk soon.
All right, bud.
This has been the FSS Plus podcast.
So just chill till the next episode. Falling back on that ass, what a hellified gangster lean. Getting funky on the mic like an old batch of collard.